Hey, everybody. Today's guest is Jocelyn King from VirgilHR. And while HR tech is kind of a boring thing, Jocelyn's story is anything but. What do you think, Maurice?
It's very boring until something goes wrong, right? And then you're going to see how boring it stays for you. No, she's fantastic. She's fantastic. She seems to be an all-around pro and super specialized in everything HR. I think she had like five other ideas. She only said like one that she mentioned, but I imagine she could found like another two or three companies at least. And it's also fantastic to have another female entrepreneur on the
Yeah.
show
Oh,
to
yeah,
just
absolutely.
show how much power there is and how much it's moving in that segment, right? In that general range. So I'm really happy that we could break the boys club up and have another female there to represent. And yeah, it's super interesting. A lot of lessons learned, and all you have to do is watch it and stay tuned.
All right, here we go.
Because really, what could go wrong once you press record, right?
Exactly. What could go wrong? It's all got to be very perfect.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Crazy People Doing a Podcast. Crazy People Podcast. I am in chair number 3. Russ Brummel over there in chair number 1, the captain of Curiosity, Maurice Hoffman. In the hot seat between us from VirgilHR, Jocelyn King. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining the show. So you are a specialist in the HR environment. So give us a bit of a background. How did you get there? Becoming an HR specialist. What is it about HR that interests you the most?
Sure. So I actually didn't know anything about HR when I went into it. I majored in philosophy, which really just meant I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I was recruited out of school by Target. And I was an HR manager in one of their high risk stores, like high crime community stores, and saw a lot, particularly on the employee relations side. It was quite a bit, and I got some great experience there. And after that, decided I wanted to dip my foot into recruiting a little bit, did recruiting at a tech company, and then moved back into HR and kind of grew in my role as manager, then as a director. And then my first role as a VP of HR, I was a VP of HR for North America for a very large public tech company. They had about 20,000 employees. And it was pretty neat because even though it was a big company, I was the first employee that they hired in North America because they're UK based. So I got to build that company from one employee, myself, to about 600 or 700 employees in 18 months. And it all happened during COVID. We were essential workers. It was totally crazy. But in a role as a generalist, which is kind of where I sit HR wise, you have every HR discipline kind of roll up into you. So it can be talent management, talent acquisition, total reward, DE&I, et cetera. And a couple of those disciplines, compliance and risk management and employee relations, all fell under me. And I found it really fascinating, especially the legal side to things. These laws, employment and labor laws, change all the time. They supersede each other. They run concurrently. There are thousands of them. And in that role, we were hiring in a lot of states very, very quickly. In that role and future roles, we were hiring a lot of remote workers in a lot of different states and jurisdictions. And so it became increasingly difficult to track and comply with employment and labor laws, particularly at the state and local level. There wasn't really a good solution out there. We were Googling online or talking to lawyers, and coming from the tech background, I had this idea in my head for a few years about how we can automate that process and really automate that research process, information gathering process, and bring everything to the top to help HR make compliant decisions with confidence without them having to know what laws exist. So 2 years ago, I started my company, and that's what we do. And we can talk about that in a bit. But what I really love most about HR is the fact that it's so multifaceted. You can get into all these different disciplines and then like sub-disciplines within them. And it's really neat. You are able to kind of like act like the world is your oyster when it comes to HR. I think what makes HR most appealing to really any professional out there is the fact that people spend more time at work than they do at home a lot of the times. And so if we can really support them and build programs and plans that make their lives better, then that's a really rewarding way of doing what you do on a day-to-day basis.
I totally believe that about the HR area. The company, my company, we are working in the benefits and perks, how you would say that from a US perspective, field. And what I see in the HR field, and kind of asking you to confirm or to give me your side of it, is that a lot of companies are struggling with everything, the entire empowerment of employees and the changing attitude and everything that kind of came post-COVID. This, hey, I don't want to work in an office anymore. Hey, I know that I have value for these companies now, and that entire mindset, it seems to be shifting and or has shifted. What is your perspective on that? How do you address these different attitudes that seem to be out there?
Well, I think it really depends on the industry that you're in. The way that you would address it in manufacturing is totally different than the way that you would address it in tech. And I'd argue that in tech, it's much easier to do that than it is in an industry like manufacturing. So I've always believed autonomy is key in getting high performance out of people and higher retention out of your workforce too. And certainly, even before COVID, but definitely with COVID, there's been a lot of change from that perspective. People being able to work where they want to work when they want to work. We are seeing, though, this attitude of entitlement that I think is very unfair to employers that exists. And some of it's generational. I definitely see kind of a younger generation having a little more entitlement in the workplace than some of the older ones. And I think every generation is going to say that about their younger generation. I remember people said that about us as millennials. But I see that quite a bit happening, particularly when it comes to talent development. This attitude of, I deserve a raise, I deserve a promotion. I know I've only been working for 3 months, but I should be a director. There's a lot of entitlement there. So balancing out empowerment with that entitlement is really hard to do. And it's a matter of being very transparent with pay, being very transparent with the way you handle the performance management and talent development process, and ensuring that there's fairness across the board. And then allowing people to make decisions in an autonomous fashion, but also understand when they need to work together as a team. And HR can do a really good job of that by developing workshops, by incorporating some of that into their talent management plan and even their compensation plan for that matter. So there's a lot that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, maybe I'm lucky. I have two 24-year-olds and a 27-year-old in my team. And they, for all sense of purposes, they working their butts off, right? I don't see any of the entitlement there. I see an eagerness that they want to really get things done and really develop, and that they are thankful for any time that I invest in their development. Really, maybe I'm lucky, but I've heard that a lot. What you described, but luckily I haven't seen it yet. But then again, on the other side, what I've seen is I already know that I'm not going to keep them in the company for more than 2 or 3 years, because then they're going to move on and going to seek out the next level, right? Maybe that mix. So how is HR in the positions that you held? How is that different from, because I've seen that you had like pre-seed companies and you went to big companies that were IPO'd already and they were established. So how does HR change, or does it change at all, really, between those different company sizes?
Yeah, it is very different. Generally, with bigger companies, you're going to be more siloed, whereas at a small company, you're a department of one, so you have to do everything.
Yeah.
Usually you get more resources at a bigger company. You're less likely to get financial resources and people resources. In a smaller company, of course, just means you're overextended. And what ends up happening is it's much more difficult to be that strategic partner to your leadership team when you're overextended and you're working in the weeds on something payroll related, for example. Whereas at a bigger company, depending on the role you're in, you're definitely afforded more of an opportunity to be that strategic player because you're not overextended in administrative work. Maybe you're overextended in strategic work, but you still have the opportunity to work on that. So there are definitely some key differences, some of them good, some of them bad on both sides. My preference, I like working with smaller companies. I did the big companies and they were really wonderful experiences, but my personality works best with smaller companies.
Why is that? Because there's more where you have more areas that you can touch, or why is that particularly so?
In my case, it was because I could function more autonomously at a smaller company. When I was working for a Series C tech startup, as an example, they had about 100 employees. I worked very closely with the whole leadership team. I had a lot of buy-in. I had a lot of influence. And I was able to not do what I wanted, but do a lot of what I wanted. There was a lot of credibility there and therefore some autonomy. Bigger companies, there's a lot of red tape. There are many layers that you have to go through to get approval on things. It took me a year to get a handbook approved, for example.
Yeah.
With a small company, it's just however long it takes me to build it out. And then I have a lawyer look at it and I roll it out. So yeah. It's just different.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. But I think it's funny, and that's what I see in my profession is that indeed the smaller companies do not seem to have so much of a strategic approach to HR, which I think is unfortunate because especially smaller companies, also when it comes to compensation, for example, I think they need to have a strategic approach because it could solve a lot of their issues. What's your perspective on that?
Absolutely. Part of my goal just personally with my company is being able to pull HR professionals out of the weeds and not be so focused on administrative work. So they can be more focused on people strategy, no matter the size of the business. Small companies, it's very, very expensive when you lose somebody on the team and you have to hire a brand new person. And as kind of you've said, if you have the right compensation plan in place that motivates and retains people, the right benefits that are available to them, if you have a really strong, very strategic talent development program, that's what keeps people around when they understand what I'm doing is directly impacting the success of the business. And I want to grow with it, and they're allowing me to grow with it and try new things. That I will say that with a small company, there's more flexibility to allow people to get involved in different areas of work. So that part is really nice. But if you just don't have the right culture in place, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So ultimately, what was the driver for you to start your company? And let's talk about your company a bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that I've been thinking about this idea for years. I thought conditional logic programming was really interesting. That might be a way that we can kind of automate this process for HR. But quitting your job and not taking pay for 2 years wasn't on the table for me. And I finally did have the opportunity to do that. And the two founders or co-founders of my last company really bullied me into it. I told them about my idea, and they're actually two of my biggest investors. And they'd said, you have to do this. So I ended up quitting and have a very supportive family. So I'm super lucky for that. We definitely had to make some adjustments to our way of life. had to make a move, had to cut back on things, but it's been really rewarding and all throughout the process. And basically what we do, I'd mentioned that it's really hard for HR to track and comply with employment and labor laws. And you're Googling or you're talking to lawyers, and there isn't really a streamlined way of getting the information you need. And more often than not, it's really time consuming. There's a high risk for error because you only know what to look for, and you might not know there are certain local laws that you have to be compliant with too. So what our tech does is it allows you to submit a query like, I have an employee requesting paternity leave in Massachusetts, and it will start asking diagnostic questions and then analyzes what federal, state, and local employment and labor laws apply to that specific employee. It tells you what all of those laws are. It will also tell you what laws are not applicable in this circumstance, just based on the individual. And then it gives very prescriptive step-by-step legal guidance on everything you need to do to be compliant with those laws. Fill out this paperwork, contact the state agency, provide the employee these notices. If you're doing a reasonable accommodation, we'll walk you through the interactive process for an ADA reasonable accommodation. So it's really there to help first sift out what laws are relevant, what benefits does this person have as a result of the laws that are applicable, and then what do you need to do in order to be compliant. And we have other pieces to our tech as well, an employee handbook builder. There's some automation built in there as well. So when new laws pass or become effective, we'll provide new policies for you to update into your handbook so it's real time instead of waiting for that once a year review with your lawyer and you realize you've been out of compliance the last 9 months. A multi-state comparison tool, policy templates, some administrative forms and employment agreements. And then something that was asked of was, even though we have all this tech, people still want to talk to people. So we have a contact and HR expert function where you can ask questions related to compliance. Sometimes it's actually not related to compliance, it's something HR related elsewhere, but usually it's about compliance. And they will talk to an HR expert and get the advice that they need.
That is really cool. It sounds like it was a super easy sailing process from you to quitting the job and then moving on to your new business, but I can't imagine it was that easy. The two co-founders of your former company, were they there with their investments right from the get-go, or did you have to go out and seek?
Yeah, so I was very, very fortunate. We ended up raising just from friends and family about $900,000. And we were able to do a lot of that upfront. So I quit my job when we got money in the bank so I could hire people.
Yeah.
And that's really when we got started. So prior to quitting my job, I was still having conversations with investors and building decks and doing pitches and all that. For a few months, but it wasn't until I got the money in the bank that I quit my job and made that change. And we actually had a round that lasted for a year, our pre-seed round. We ended up raising $1.5 million. We had mostly friends and family in the beginning, but then 4 institutions came on toward the end, including Techstars and Sherm Labs, Squadra Ventures, and TEDCO, which is a Maryland technology fund. So they support Maryland-run businesses and provide some institutional funding for them.
That is fantastic. What was the toughest decision that you had to make at the beginning, besides quitting your job at the right point?
Quitting my job was a tough one. It was terrifying, actually. The toughest decision, I think it really surrounded the product. You know, I had no clue what I was doing. And it wasn't until I joined Techstars that I learned a whole lot more. But we weren't really talking to HR practitioners when we were building out the product, because in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm the end user, so we'll just build it out the way I want it to be, which is ridiculous. And so it was really hard making some decisions around how we wanted to build out our product roadmap. Did we want to initially integrate from the very beginning? Did we want to do a web-based application? Because there were a lot of unknowns, since we weren't talking to our ICP, there were some tough decisions that were made and probably some tech debt that we incurred as a result of it. So definitely really great looking back on it and taking that lesson learned.
Yeah. So what was the lesson that you learned when you eventually did talk to one of your potential customers, where you thought like, I can't believe that is true?
Well,
Anything
okay.
like that?
This was, I was very surprised by this, but I thought for sure everybody would want a product that would integrate into their HRIS. And we can integrate into an HRIS, and it's really cool because we can actually track what people are doing. And then when they're about to make a decision that has a legal consequence, like a termination, for example, or a demotion, our chatbot just automatically pops up and says, let's have a conversation. I thought that was so cool. Nobody wanted to do the integration. They all wanted a web application. So we had to stop 7 months of work and switch over to web-based application. And that's what we've been able to sell. It's been interesting. I've only had a couple people ask me about HRIS integrations. We will definitely go there because I know there's a need for it, especially with larger companies. But today we're selling to small, medium-sized businesses, and they just don't want to deal with the integration. So they've been working with our web app, but that was shocking to me.
Yeah, the funny thing is, we are, as I said, we work in the benefit and perks area, and we have a web app too, and we are looking to have APIs into HRIS systems.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that in Germany, besides all the integration and all that part, everybody's scared of the data, right? Everybody's like, yeah, but what kind of data will you get? Well, whatever you allow us to get, actually, because that's what you can do in the HRS system. No, I don't believe that. I don't want to have this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, luckily we haven't done it yet, right? We didn't cross that bridge yet, but it's yeah, it's definitely not something that we expected as well, that everybody would be so standoffish when it comes to, that would make it much easier for you guys, right? Yeah, I don't care. It's data. Can't do this.
I think one of the ugly secrets though is that I know in sales, people do a whole lot of their work outside of the CRM and then push it back in. I suspect in HR, until you get into a company that really needs compliance, a bunch of people do a lot of work outside the HRIS and then make sure it gets back in there, once it's all done, right? So I think that's human nature. Let me do it the easiest possible way, right? Or let me do it at least the way that I like most. So
Yeah.
I guess the question in there, Jocelyn, is as you sort of discovered and now talk to more customers and obviously selling the product now,
Mm-hmm.
what's the weird thing that you're like, I can't believe people are doing that?
Yeah, so now that we've been able to really analyze how users are utilizing the product, the most popular feature is the employee handbook builder, which was surprising to me. Uh, I hate handbooks, and that's probably why they're doing it, is because they hate handbooks too. But I was very, very excited about the chatbot. And even though the chatbot is really well utilized, the handbook is the most popular feature that we have. And that was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Nice.
Whatever takes away from people needing to do the hard work, right? That's where exactly what they like to do. For us, it's the, oh boy, I don't know how to say it in English. There's in Germany, essentially you need a document that needs to be created by a lawyer that really defines what the benefits and the compensation looks like across the board for all the benefits. Because otherwise somebody could come and sue and do whatever, right? Because the one employee over doesn't have the same benefits as you have. So yeah, that needs to be created by a lawyer. There's a certain framework for it, and that seems to be the biggest thing that we are selling right now, right? It's not our benefits, it's not our core products and whatever. It's this little side product that we just kind of adopted because it had to be done. Is really what people are after, and that is so funny. Any other surprises along those lines?
Not really, no. I expected people to really use the tool the way that they've been using it. I expected the feedback we'd been getting. There's nothing crazy with the feedback that we've received so far. It was all pretty standard stuff and just really helpful things that we can do to add to our product more than anything else. We haven't had anybody say, they don't like something about the product, and we have a really great satisfaction score. The most recent one that just came out was a 4.75 out of 5. So
Nice.
people are really happy with the product. But there's some really great ideas that are being generated from our customers on what we can do to add more functionality to it that I really, really appreciate. We've actually just put together now kind of a product champion group, so to speak. Our most frequent users are involved a lot in our beta testing and just kind of providing some feedback to us on what we can be doing to improve the product. So it's been good.
Yeah, fantastic. That's Russ. Do you remember? And I always have to go back. Russ and I used to work in the same company. And in that company, I was, among other things, responsible for the research. And I kept saying to the product team, listen, guys, at the beginning, for the first few years, there's nothing you have to do in terms of research. You just have to listen to your customers. They're going to tell you what to do, right? And once they're all satisfied, then you can do your active research and start from there. But a lot of people don't seem to follow that path. So the HR bit runs fantastic. Your product is fantastic. I mean, that rating is really great. But how was it for you to really step behind, like do the one skip over? In basketball, you say it's everything great as long as you're the assistant coach. But once you're the head coach, everything changes, right?
Yeah, because
So
the life in HR always has a fire to put out and always has an issue, right? But now you're in charge. That's a whole other, yeah.
How is that for you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, so I'm naturally very bossy and assertive. So that helped a lot. But no, I enjoy it quite a bit. So much so that I wonder if I would ever get back into HR, actually. I love the entrepreneurial journey. The people that I've met, the challenges that I've faced have been really unique, and definitely, stressful, under no certain terms. But it's just been an incredible opportunity that I've had to do this, and I enjoy all of it. I enjoy being able to really not just influence, but actually make those decisions on the product roadmap, for example, or a content roadmap, decisions with the engineering team on, what type of technology they should be using, or with our marketing department on what they should really be talking about and what's most important to HR professionals. So super lucky that I have the HR background, and as an industry founder, it definitely puts me in a position where it's a little easier to do this. But yeah, I don't know if I'd go back into HR.
And why would you?
Why would I?
Yeah, why would you go back to HR?
I think I would just really have to miss it. I'd have to miss kind of working on the people strategy and working more closely with managers and all that good stuff, because when you're a CEO, you obviously don't get that same visibility. And you don't get to build those relationships either the same way you do when you're in human resources. So that's something I definitely miss, and maybe I will go back to that, but we'll see.
Okay. What are the lessons that you had to learn along the way that you didn't expect?
Well, first one I mentioned was the product. That was a really big one, not talking to our ICP before actually developing the product. In fact, if I do another company again, before doing a single thing with the product, I will be speaking with our ICP and talking to a lot of them and getting the feedback, because I don't want to make that mistake again. So that was a really big one. I think too that there are some really great lessons learned on the go-to-market side. Getting involved more quickly with partnerships is a really great way to go with HR tech. And I was very focused on direct marketing until more recently. And so I wish I'd started the partnership piece sooner. So that's another thing that in retrospect, I would like to have done, but partnerships not always right for every company. And so we were trying to figure out what worked best for us. So that was another thing. I don't know. I think that our financing round went really well. So I don't know if there's anything that I would have done differently. I guess now I just have the opportunity to do it better the next time because I know more people. So So that helps.
You know, as somebody who founded their company 2 weeks ago, asking for a friend, what was the best message that you had in a financing round? How did you position yourselves there?
The best message. So I'm not one for fear marketing. I don't really like that. But I think really showcasing the problem that you are solving is incredibly important. And once you get buy-in from your audience, and what this problem is and why it's so big and why a solution needs to exist, then explaining the solution from there, you already have that buy-in. And I think it's a bit easier to have that conversation from there. So that's what I would suggest focusing on from a messaging perspective.
Fantastic. I keep that in mind. We are just now until, I don't know, half an hour ago, I was working on our pitch deck, the first pitch deck, when we get in front of investors, and yeah, that's going to be interesting. So, and then also asking for a friend, the partnership side. What worked so well for you in the partnership side?
Well, the partnership side is very new. So we're still having conversations with different potential partners, both strategic partners and referral partners. And we've kind of now brought in a fractional head of partnerships who comes from the HR tech space, which is really great. And he's awesome. And so we're building out a program and set our KPIs and kind of identified our targets and are moving from there. So it's very new. Up until recently, it was more referral partners from smaller groups like HR consulting firms, for example, where there wasn't a lot of lift that I had to do on my end to make that happen. Part of the reason why we've waited as long as we have is because I've been the one handling sales, and Russ knows this because we meet every other Friday to talk about it. I'm super overextended, and so I can't focus on every single thing, and partnerships really takes a commitment in building that program and executing against the plans that you've put in place. And so now we're finally at a point where we're able to do that.
Yeah, okay. The super overextended part, that's that's resonating. That's resonating. Fantastic. You mentioned you may want to found another company. Without knowing anything for sure, what would interest you, like top two?
Actually, I have an idea already. I won't go into it too much, but it would be focused around HR analytics to drive strategy in the workplace.
Nice. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, so it would continue to be HR related until I can get more creative. Right now, I'm just kind of sitting in my comfort zone, which is HR.
Yeah, I mean, with the breadth of knowledge that you have in that field, right? Why not do more in HR? I'm pretty sure that you have 10 ideas where you see like other HR departments could, HR departments or HR people could need help with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of room for growth in different areas, and there are definitely some parts of HR like compliance that are underserved today, especially in technology. So there's a lot of opportunity there too.
Fantastic. If you were to speak to a younger HR starter right now, what would be the top three kind of pointers you would give that person? Like, hey, these are the three things you really need to focus on, or that you need to learn as much about as possible.
Yeah, well, I'm very biased as a generalist. I think everybody should start as a generalist and then figure out what they like best. It's kind of like going to law school, you don't know what type of law you want to practice until you've taken all the classes and figured out what's interesting to you. So, I would always recommend that somebody start off in a generalist role just to get a feel for all the different pieces of HR, and they might be passionate about continuing in a generalist role, or they might find a huge passion for total reward, and that's great, and then they can move into that. So that's one thing. I think the other thing too is that change management isn't really talked about very often, especially at a lower level in HR. And that's really, really important, especially when you want to be that strategic partner and get buy-in from your organization. The buy-in piece is really key, and really helping people understand why there's change, not just why there's change and what you're doing to implement that change, but also make them part of that process in identifying what the change should be in the first place. So getting more involved in change management would really set you up for success, because not many people out there are focused on it. So that's another thing. And then the last thing that I would recommend is really becoming more comfortable advising leadership. So in a more entry-level role, that might feel intimidating to do, but even if you can do that with a manager level, like at your level or right above you, and practice a lot on how to influence them to make the right decisions for their team, how to coach them through conversations, difficult conversations, especially that they're having with their employees, and really working with them on handling employee relations issues in a sensitive way is another key thing to focus on too.
Fantastic. What would be the and I'm getting to the quick hit questions that we have towards the end of it. What would be the top suggestion that you would have for your younger self? Let's say your 16-year-old self, talking to her. What would your advice what would that look like?
Oh, for my 16-year-old self, I would tell myself not to put so much pressure on myself and feel like I needed to apply to 17 different colleges and, be ashamed if I didn't get into all of them. I was really, really hard on myself as a teenager and don't think I appreciated being a teenager as much as I could have. So I'd tell myself to relax a little bit.
Yeah, I get that part. I get that part. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the question I would have, especially for a young Jocelyn, how would you advise her on being a female tech startup, founder?
Oh, it's interesting because my daughter goes to an all-girls school, and the senior class does kind of like a Shark Tank type thing their second semester. And I'm getting involved with that, which I'm really excited about. So I will have the opportunity to actually do this.
There you go.
And I think there are a few key things. Don't think that there's no competition, because there's always some type of competition out there. And nobody does things the way that we do it, but there are people out there trying to solve the same problem. So always keeping that in mind. And then, really getting a lot of feedback on your product, especially early on, is key if you want to get into starting your own tech startup. So that part is key. And really being able to establish yourself as that young professional early on. So if you wanted to start your own tech company at 20 and you're going in front of investors, you're well-spoken, you're polished, you know what you're talking about, you understand your market, and you understand kind of all the key areas that you'll be focused on as a CEO, like go-to-market and pricing and all that good stuff. So just being really well prepared is important, and don't ever think that you're too young to do it, because there are plenty of people out there who do. And I would encourage anybody, if you have a good idea, to seek out on LinkedIn or in your personal network an adult out there who's done it, who can kind of walk you through that too.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that's one bit that is kind of underappreciated, right? They're reaching out to people, and really, because I had a mentor many years ago, and he said, even in the sales context, he said asking for help, even as a salesperson, is absolutely undervalued, because it kind of lowers the walls, right, that you otherwise get, because everybody is being asked for something, but it's rarely help, right? It's really I'm not the big sales guy, I'm not a salesperson, and I'm not, here I come. It's the humble approach, the asking for help and showing what you can't do and try to get insights. That is something that seems to come across very well, right? Where people have a totally different attitude towards you.
Yes, and I think that a lot of that comes with maturity and professional maturity. More often than not, a younger person is not going to ask for help because they don't want to be seen as incompetent. And it's just that's just not it. That's not how you're seen. You know, you're seen as seeking to understand and self-improving. And I have a marketing specialist on my team who's 23, just graduated college, and she wasn't asking for help in the very beginning. And so I sat her down and said, this is really important. I don't want you wasting 4 hours of your day trying to figure this out and then getting it wrong. Talk to us. We won't think that you don't know what you're doing. In fact, we'll think that you do know what you're doing because you're coming and asking for help. So just do it.
Yeah, that's the funny bit. I'm a bit into basketball, not so much watching the games, but all the talk around it.
Mm.
And that is something that people keep saying about guys like Kobe Bryant, that he would call everyone at all times in the hour and just ask and ask and ask and ask all those questions, right? I mean, there's this famous bit at his funeral where Michael Jordan is standing there and he's like, he was a pain in my neck. He just wouldn't let go, right? And that's how they became friends eventually, because he respected that this guy would just keep asking, which usually young people, but to what you just said, usually young people don't do that, right? Because they see it as a weakness, where it's really a strength. And it's, from my perspective, it's showing them utmost respect if you ask questions to somebody, because you cherish their experience and their opinion, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that note, speaking to interesting people, if you had to come up with a dinner, invite 5 people, whoever they are, dead or alive, who would that be?
Oh my gosh, it would take me forever to actually give you a real answer on this. Let's see. I would, I think Winston Churchill is like the most amazing, iconic person of, the 20th century. So would definitely invite Winston Churchill. I think Virgil, who's our namesake, the poet, would invite him as well. I'd probably invite my grandmother, passed away, really, so I could see her again. She probably wouldn't have much to say because she doesn't speak English. And
What does she speak?
What's that?
Which language does she speak? Would she? Spanish. Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then I think that oh my gosh, I forget her last name. She's the CEO of Spanx, Sarah something. I forget her last name now. I think she's like an amazing female entrepreneur, and would love to talk to her too. So those are some key people I'd probably invite to dinner. Maybe my husband can come. I haven't decided yet.
Is he like on the outside looking in, or?
Yeah, he can just hang out in the living room while we have our dinner.
Fantastic. Hey, Jocelyn, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I always like to have female entrepreneurs on the show, because my wife is fighting the good fight as well, so I can see what she's struggling with. And so just to go out there and show the good examples that there is other females out there that really doing a great job and really pushing through that glass ceiling that somehow seems to be there, but I hope it's gone very soon. So thank you so much for sharing your experience, sharing your stories, and that I was able to ask a couple of questions for a friend.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a pleasure speaking to both of you. You, Russ, as always.
Thanks,
and I wish you the best of luck with your new venture. That's exciting.
Thank you so much.